tonight at the Library Activity Room at the Flint Memorial Library.
Thank you so much for coming.
We have Hank Phillippi. Ryan discusses her 2012 novel, The Other Woman, a mystery set in Boston. Tuesday, March 12th at 7 p.m. at the Flint Memorial Library.
We welcome you for a special event tonight with the author Hank Phillippi Ryan. And we are being filmed for NORCAM. I'd like to thank Mark Meehl for filming. I'd like to thank the Friends of the Library for arranging this evening, and Haley Booksellers. Dick Haley is going to be selling Hank's books afterwards. And I know you've all met her. She's come around and introduced herself to everyone. And just before I say a few words about Hank, I'd just like to say this is part of our North Reading Reads community reading program this year. And we are honoring the late Robert B. Parker. And we have an event on Saturday, a concert with Art Grossman, and then a week from Thursday on the 21st, Joan Parker, who is the widow of the late author, is going to be here to meet with us. And we're very honored to have Hank here. Many of you know her both from her books and from all the work she's done on Channel 7, advocacy for people. And her latest book is The Other Woman. And previous to that, she wrote 4 books in a series with Charlotte McNally, Primetime, FaceTime, Airtime. And she won an award for the first one, the Agatha. And she's just found out recently that The Other Woman has been nominated for both the Agatha and the Mary Higgins Clark Award. She's originally from Indiana, and also president of the National Sisters in Crime. And so we're very honored and we're looking forward to hearing you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you so much for inviting me. It's fun to hear the introductions, you know. You think, oh yeah, that's good, I love that award. You know, oh yeah, that was fun to write about those books. First of all, thank you for coming. You cannot turn the channel. I'm actually here. You know, you're saying to each other, we watch Channel 5, you know, change it. No, I'm actually standing here. And congratulations on doing the Robert B. Parker retrospective. Joan Parker is amazing when you meet her. She's hilarious and adorable and charming and genuine and devoted. And Robert B. Parker was such a fabulous guy. I knew him and adored him, and you know that remember Kate's Mystery Bookstore in Cambridge, and he actually helped her when that store opened. He actually helped her put up the bookshelves on the wall, and every year Kate would have a Christmas party. I almost said at Christmas time, and he would come and sort of hold court, and all the mystery fans would come and sort of pay homage to Robert B. Parker. And it's funny how I think of him as Robert B. Parker, and not Bob, and people call him Bob, but I think of him as Robert B. Parker. And it was so funny, tender and poignant at his memorial service. Sue Grafton was there. I mean, talk about fabulous. And she said too that she also always thought of him as Robert B. Parker. I mean, they were great friends, but she still referred to him as Robert B. Parker all the time. So we are very grateful to him. He gave me, I mean, one of the last blurbs he ever gave to an author was to me for my book Drive Time. And he said, Hank understands plotting and she writes beautifully. And then he said, and he was so, I mean, this is just more than you ever needed to know, but he was so lovely and so genuine that instead of emailing me the blurb or telling me the blurb, he wrote it in one stationery and signed it. So I could actually have this piece of paper, a letter from Robert B. Parker, which is about how good my book is. You know, so it's a treasure, and it's signed, it's framed in my study, and I look at it all the time. So congratulations to the library for having such a wonderful event. And tell Joan Parker I said hello. She's fabulous. I'm on the committee of New England Mobile Book Fair. Joan has agreed to be on the committee with us at New England Mobile Book Fair to every year give an award to an emerging author named after Robert B. Parker. So I would love to know what he would have thought of that. You know, somebody horning in on his territory. So, but we definitely miss him. Thank you so much for coming out tonight. It is miserable outside. It is miserable. And you have lives, and you have things to do, and you have chores, and you have jobs, and you know, if you ever think to, and you all made the decision to come out here tonight, and I am very grateful for that. You know, you're sitting at home, and I speak for every author when I tell you, you know, you're sitting at home and you're thinking, no, go to the library thing, no, maybe yes, maybe no, oh, nobody will notice, I won't go. And I'm telling you that we do notice, we do care. Every author stands in the back of the room pretending like we're not seeing how many people show up. And every time the door opens and then you come in, I think, oh yay, you know, you come in, I think, hey. So I'm very grateful, and every author is very grateful when you come to events like this. So I really appreciate it. Libraries have been part of my life since I was a little girl. I grew up in very rural Indiana, in a town called Zionsville, Indiana, which is on the outskirts of Indianapolis. And we used to go to we used to ride our ponies to the library. That's how we got our books. And I know I look like kind of a city girl now, but I grew up cleaning out stalls before I went to school in the morning and going to the library on our ponies, and we would come back with the books in the backpacks and go up into the hayloft and read. And that's how I grew up with libraries. And then as a reporter, you know, as I became a reporter all those years later, libraries were, of course, very much still important in my life, because who knows, you know, before the days of Google and the internet, who knows more than the reference librarian at a library? So I'm sure I bugged the ones around Boston mercilessly for them to tell me all the scoop. And I learned in my sort of workaholicness that if the libraries in Boston were closed while I was still working, all I had to do was call California, where the librarians were still on call. You know, because of the time zones, I had 3 more hours that I could work. So they've really been helpful. Librarians have been helpful to me in libraries through my whole career. I mean, back in the days of doing research at the library, you know, I had to use the microfiche. Remember the microfiche? That's a horrible instrument. And the newspaper readers where you could zoom by with the, I think they go like this now, but when I did them, they were like this. And you would just, the stuff would go by and there was no index and you couldn't tell where anything was and you couldn't find anything. And I would be really distracted by the ads, you know, in the newspaper. I was like, ooh, look, a hat for $2.50. How interesting, you know, oyster is a nickel. Isn't that funny? And get completely distracted from my work. But so I'm very grateful to libraries. But anyway, tonight is a little bit about my new book, The Other Woman. I'm so proud and happy to show you this. It's in a 3rd printing now, so that's fantastic. It's been on the Boston Globe bestseller list 3 times, and there's still time for more. You know, it's the first in a new series. My first 4 books were about a television reporter, Charlotte McNally, who's worried that she's getting too old for television. I really scraped the bottom for that one. But this is the first in a brand new series. I love it. When my agent got the cover, she called me and she said, "Oh, wait till you see the cover of The Other Woman. You'll love it. It's so beautiful. You could just eat it." And so I got it and I thought, oh yes, look at that. And then I realized it says, Hank Phillippi Ryan, The Other Woman. Which is like, I don't know. And it's funny because then my next book, and this is, when you see, do you want, here, why don't you have my water?
That's okay. I give Marcy to the rescue.
Okay, because if you need it, you can. But I'll just make them give me more water. Now that I've called complete attention to you when you're trying not to. Anyway, so Hank Phillippi Ryan, The Other Woman, which is sort of, I'm sad. But you were the first people to see, really the first people to see. This just arrived. This is the new book that comes out this fall, The Wrong Girl. And as you can see, it says Hank Phillippi Ryan, The Wrong Girl. There's not even the real book in this. This is a different book. But this comes out. I know, I just wanted to show it off, the cover. It's so you're the first people on the planet outside of the publishing and me to see this. So I think it's kind of great. It comes out in the fall. Even if you took this one, somebody else's book is inside, so it doesn't matter. But the juxtaposition reminds me, I've been a television reporter for more than 30 years. It's 37 years. When I do speeches, I always say I've been a television reporter for more than 30 years, and I've sort of gotten away with that for a while. But I've been on book tour for The Other Woman, and I was in Chapel Hill, North Carolina, where another author was speaking with me. Now, you all know me from television, so you know I've been on Channel 7 for a long time, investigative reporter. I've won 28 Emmys for investigative reporting. I mean, you know this. But in Chapel Hill, they have no idea who I am. So I was getting up and making my little introductory speech, and I say, you know, I've been a television reporter for more than 30 years. And this other author who was with me, waiting her turn, goes, Hank, it's 37 years. It's 37. And here I am trying to be adorable, and she's out there with my bio, you know, and a calculator, figuring out how long it's really been. But anyway, I've been a reporter for a long time. You know, I know you're saying 37 years. Yes, I know. And the juxtaposition of the name reminds me of when we were doing a story. We decided to do a story about an investigation about headlights and how headlights get dimmer as time goes by, that we think we can't see as well as we used to, but really the plastic on your headlights, not headlights, headlights. The plastic on your headlights gets thicker and more opaque, and the bulbs actually get less bright. So we think we can't see at night or in the rain, but really it's that our headlights are not working as well as they used to. So we did a big investigative story about this, and you know, the last thing that you do, and I went out and reported the story, and we shot the story and did interviews and did an experiment, and the last thing that you do when you're reporting a story is in the edit booth, you put the story together, make a little movie out of it, and then you come out and do what they call a stand-up close, and you've seen that on television a million times, where the reporter stands in front of a graphic that says like "big fire," so that you know what's going on. And you say, and the end of it is like Hank Phillippi Ryan 7 News. That's called the stand-up close. So I put on my little reporter suit and all my makeup, and I came down to the newsroom to do my stand-up close. And I look behind me, and the graphic behind me says, "dangerously dim." And so I burst out laughing, and I said, so I ran to the news director, and I said, "Do you see what this says? This says dangerously dim. I can't stand in front of a graphic that says dangerously dim." And he burst out laughing just like you did, and then he goes, "Yeah, we really don't have time to change that." So I had to stand in front of dangerously dim. The only time that I've ever seen anything that was worse than that was we had a gorgeous anchor woman who had to stand in front of a graphic about a story that said, "botched plastic surgery." So we play that at our Christmas parties now. So that'll teach you a new way of looking at television. Fun with graphics. You know, it's a different way of looking at the world. Anyway, as I told you, I've been a reporter for more than 30 years. Now I know you're saying 37 years. I've wired myself with hidden cameras, confronted corrupt politicians, chased down criminals. I've gone undercover and in disguise. But I really never planned on being a reporter. I got my first start in the grown-up world as a staffer on a political campaign in Indiana. When I got out of college, I decided that what I wanted to do was change the world a little bit, you know, to do something wonderful and helpful and leave my mark on the world. So I decided I would go into politics. So I went to work for candidates in my home state of Indiana. And I got to learn how candidates really work, how politicians think, what it's like to be on a campaign. You know, I worked on speeches and did constituent mail and answered complaints and flew on the helicopter, you know, went to county fairs and ate corn dogs, those kinds of things. And I really got to see campaigns from the inside, and it was quite an education. Sadly, no candidate I ever worked for actually won. And this is one of those moments in your life when you realize that perhaps you have chosen the wrong career, and perhaps there might be a plan B in the works. But one of the things that I believe in so strongly is that when something bad happens, something good will happen as a result. Do you know what I mean? When you're disappointed or upset, or what you hoped will happen doesn't happen, and then soon after, something unpredictably wonderful will happen as a result. And you think, you know what, I'd take the bad thing for the good thing that happened as a result. I mean, that's happened to you. And that is how I got my first job in broadcasting, because yet another candidate who I worked for lost the election. And instead of being the assistant to the governor of Indiana, I was unemployed. So I went to the biggest radio station in Indianapolis. And you have to remember, I was 20, and an English major, a Shakespeare major. As my parents would say, unemployable. I didn't know anything. I went to the biggest radio station in Indiana, and I applied. I went to the news director, and I said, I'm here to apply for the job as a radio reporter. So this news director says, well, do you have any experience? Have you ever been a reporter? I'm like, dread. The dreaded experience question, because I had no idea. So I said, well, no, I don't really have any experience. And he said, well, have you ever done an interview? Have you ever written a story? Have you ever covered the news? Have you ever reported anything? Did you work for the school paper? How about the yearbook? Give me something. I'm like, no, sorry. I'm so sorry. I just don't have any experience like that, but I knew I wanted this job. So I said, you know what? I grew up here in Indiana. I know where all the streets are. That's got to work. And I said, I know, you have to sort of go with what you've got. And I said, and your license is up for renewal at the FCC, and you don't have any women working here. And then I just smiled. And the next day I had my first job in broadcasting. But here's why I tell the story to journalism students, because it is an indication of how far we've come. When I started in television even, there were hardly any women in television. And I'm really proud to be part of the history of women in broadcasting who sort of broke the glass ceiling. Barbara Walters and Jane Pauley and Jessica Savage and Diane Sawyer. We all sort of started at the same time. And who would have thought back then, when there were only 3 networks? Well, there were 4, right? If you used both hands to churn both buttons, and and the other one was like fuzzy cartoons on UHF. Anyway, who'd have thought back then when you had to get up to change the channel, right? I talk to some crowds and I'll say, you have to get up to change the channel, and there are people, young people in the audience go, no. Yeah, you really did. Anyway, Diane Sawyer would be anchoring the evening news, or that Katie Couric would be sitting in Walter Cronkite's chair. It's quite amazing how things have changed. But really, from the moment I read my first Nancy Drew book, I knew I wanted to be a mystery author. You read Nancy Drew, right? The Clue in the Old Clock and the Clue in the Diary, which I thought was Clue in the Dairy for like the whole book. And I'm thinking, shouldn't there be cows somewhere in this? But I finally figured it out. And I loved the mystery. I loved the puzzle and the architecture of the mystery, and how the author could lead you down a path of thinking if you just could figure it out, the answers would be there. I went on to read Niall Marsh and Josephine Tay, Marjorie Allingham, of course Agatha Christie, all the wonderful British women authors. And I fell in love with that mystery, with the rhythm of the mystery and the secrets of the mystery. But of course my life took a different turn, and I became a television reporter. Now you're thinking 37 years, right? I became a television reporter, but I realized that along the way, that writing for television and writing mysteries, although they seem like they would be very similar, very different, they seem like they'd be very different, they're very similar, because whether you're writing fiction or nonfiction, the way to be successful is to tell a great story, right? A wonderful story with compelling characters and a problem that needs to be solved. You want the good guys to win and the bad guys to get what's coming to them. And in the end, you're hoping to change the world a little bit. You're hoping for some justice. And I realized that whether I was writing a story for television, which was all true, or writing fiction, that it was the same thing. That I want you to not be able to turn the channel. I want you not to be able to put the book down. Writing a page turner or writing a thrilling television story, it's the same, because it's all about telling a wonderful story. And that's what I do every day in television. I want you to say, wow, I never thought about that. I never thought of the world that way. I didn't know that until you told me. You know, when I think about all the, I've won 28 Emmys for investigative reporting. And every one of those statues represents a secret that someone didn't want me to tell you, right? It represents a secret that someone didn't want you to know. And as a result of our work as a reporter, you got to know that. So whether it's television or whether it's fiction, it's all about secrets. And that is the key to The Other Woman. It's all about secrets. Now, remember I told you about something good coming out of something bad. And that's exactly where the idea for The Other Woman came from. It came because I needed a root canal. I know. What good could come from a root canal? Well, here's the deal. I needed a root canal, so I'm in the dentist's office, waiting for the dentist to come. He's late. I'm really cranky. My tooth is hurting. My face is puffy. The dentist is late. I'm sitting in the office unhappy. Let me just put it that way. I'm unhappy. I'm missing work. It's a bad day all around. No good can come of this. And I picked up an Old People magazine. Not an old People magazine. an old issue of People magazine. An old People magazine. And in that magazine was an article about Mark Sanford. You remember who that is, right? You're nodding. The ex-governor of South Carolina, who told his wife and his family and his constituents that he was out hiking the Appalachian Trail when he was really off with his Argentinian mistress. And in reading this article, I began to think, who would be the other woman? Why would you do that? I mean, it's just a bad idea. Because first of all, you're going to get caught. There's no question about it. You're going to get caught, whether it's in the privacy of your kitchen or on the front page of the New York Times, like General Petraeus and any number of other people who we've been reading about recently. You're going to get caught. So, I mean, think about the other women in politics who we know. Elizabeth Ray and Riel Hunter and even Kay Summersby. I mean, Monica Lewinsky could win the Nobel Prize. And what would the headline say, right? You know, Monica Lewinsky, former paramour of President Clinton, wins Nobel Prize. I mean, there's no escaping that. So you're going to have this scarlet letter forever. You're going to ruin your life. You're going to ruin the man's life, obviously, right? Because here's this person you ostensibly love, and you're going to ruin his life and his wife's life on purpose and his children's life on purpose. And also, here's a person who was an elected official. I mean, working in public service is one of the highest callings you can possibly have. And he was willing to throw that away. So I thought, why would someone do that? And then because I'm a thriller author and a mystery author, and I'm all about secrets, I began to wonder whether there was some reason that I hadn't thought of yet. You know, whether it's love or lust or power or corruption or selfishness, what would it be that would cause someone to be the other woman? And that perhaps there was a wonderful, amazing, unusual, unique, unpredictable reason that no one had thought of yet that would make a wonderful, big, fat thriller. And as I was reading this article, someone in the article said at the end, you can choose your sin, but you cannot choose your consequences. And I just thought, my book, this is it. So there I am in the dentist's office with a puffy face and hurting teeth and goosebumps because I knew I had had a good idea. So The Other Woman is about sex and secrets and duplicity and fidelity and marriage and husbands and wives and what it means to be in love with someone, and also how far someone will go to get what they want. It's also about secrets. Everyone in The Other Woman has a secret, and it's also about, as it says on the front, you can choose your sin, but you cannot choose your consequences. It's all about how every decision that we all make, each time we make a decision, it reverberates and resonates on someone else. Even when we think we're doing the right thing, the dominoes will fall and people's lives will be changed. It's a fast-paced thriller set in Boston. It stars Jane Ryland. Jane Ryland is a television reporter who was fired for protecting a source. Jane Ryland refused to give the source of a big exclusive story that she had. And as a result, her television station loses a $1 million lawsuit. So her station loses the big bucks, and Jane is thrown under the bus. She's fired. So she gets a low-level, low-paying job at a local newspaper, and she's on the road to redemption. She needs to prove herself now because she's lost her job, and the people in Boston think that she's made a mistake. And that's, the one thing we have as reporters is our reputation, and we have to be right. And once we lose that, we're doomed. And that's how Jane feels as the book opens. She feels she's doomed, she's lost her reputation, and she needs to get that back. So Jane is on the trail. It takes place in Boston at the beginning, at the very beginning of the last week of a Senate campaign, a hard-fought Senate campaign. And Jane begins to worry Jane begins to suspect that one of the candidates in this election is having an affair. And she thinks so because she sees in the newspaper archives the picture of the same woman in a red coat at event after event after event, in Scituate and in Framingham and in Springfield and in Swampscott and in Boston and in Worcester. She sees this same woman, and nobody will tell her who that is. No one in the campaign will admit to knowing her. So Jane begins to think that this is obviously the gubernatorial candidate's mistress. But the question is, what if she's wrong? What if she's wrong? She's already lost her job ostensibly once for being wrong. If she's wrong again, she'll ruin her life, she'll ruin the woman's life, she'll lose her job, and and her career will be lost. So Jane can't afford to make a mistake. The other main character in the book is a Boston detective, Jake Rogan. And Jake is on the trail of a potential serial killer in Boston. 2 bodies have been found, both under bridges, both in Boston, the Longfellow Bridge and the Zachem Bridge, you'll recognize. 2 women without identification and without shoes. And the Boston press is clamoring that this is the work of a serial killer. But Jake isn't so sure. Jake isn't so sure there's a serial killer. But the problem is, again, like Jane, what if he's wrong? What if he's wrong? What if he tells the people of Boston that they're safe when there's really a killer on the loose? So Jane is on the trail of an ex-governor's secret mistress. Jake is on the trail of a potential serial killer. And when the next person who's killed is a pivotal person in the senatorial campaign, Jane and Jake begin to realize that they may be on the trail of the same person. So, as the book says, seduction, betrayal, and murder. It's going to take a lot more than votes to win this election. And that is what The Other Woman is about. I mean, you'll recognize Boston and New England. You'll recognize the Esplanade and the State House and the archives. You'll see this is the bridge to the Esplanade over Beacon Hill. They didn't do it exactly right, but that's what this is. And the book was a best of 2012 for the Boston Globe, and also the best of 2012 for the Kansas City Star and the Sacramento Bee. So you can see that people nationwide have loved the book, but you all will get it more than anyone because it's very local. You'll recognize these places. My husband and I will be driving down the Mass Pike, and I'll say, "Oh, exit 17. This is where Jane was chased by the truck." And then I think, "No, I made that up. I made that up." So you'll recognize it's very local. And who would have thought that all those years as a political campaigner, and all these years as a television reporter, turned out to be more than just doing that job for the job's sake. It turned out to be, people say to me, do you do research for your books? And I say, I've done 40 years of research. My whole life has been research. And what a joy to be able to have that. Not only have laws and lives changed as a result of my investigative reporting, but to have this book that people love and email me about come out of that, and to have this sort of second part of my life emerge. It's things that you can't predict, things that you don't know. My husband and I went to hear Judy Collins at Sanders Theater at Harvard a couple of months ago. you know who Judy Collins is, right? There are places where I speak and they don't, I can look at them and they go, Judy Collins, you know, no idea. When I told my producer, who's like 30, I told my producer that we were going to hear Judy Collins, and she says, oh, great, that's wonderful. Clearly having no idea who it was. So I had to explain folk singer, 60s, wouldn't have made it through college without listening to her records. And then I'm like, records, you know. So anyway, we went to hear Judy Collins, and she told the story about how she had been trained as a child. Her parents had brought her up thinking that she would be a concert pianist, and she was a very accomplished pianist. But she said she always knew that she wanted to be a folk singer. That all of her life she knew she wanted to be a folk singer. And she loved playing the piano, but that was not what was in her soul. And she said finally, when she was about 19, she decided she was just going to move to New York and follow her dreams. So she said, I packed up all my stuff at age 19, I packed my suitcases, and I moved to New York, and I took all my songs with me. And then she said, of course, I hadn't written any of them yet. You know, and it just touched me, because I think all of us have songs, but we haven't necessarily quite written them yet. And I am so much the poster child for following your dreams in midlife. I started writing my first book, Primetime, when I was 55 years old. You know, at a time when people might think, oh, it's fine, you've had a great life, it's over, you know, good career, good for you, but you're done. But I knew that I had wanted to do that. As I told you, I had wanted to do that my whole life. And if there's nothing that you take from this evening, except I want you to understand that following your dreams is something that is never too late to do. You know, if you wanted to write your memoirs or write your novel or that book of poetry or learn a new language or make a change or try something new or start a business, I'm the proof that it is never too late to do that. And it can be quite wonderful. I don't use an outline when I write. So every day is a surprise for me. Every day that I sit down at the computer, something new comes out, something that I don't expect. And people say, wow, there was such a surprise ending. You know, you got me with that. And I say, yeah, it was. You know, could you believe it? Because it was a surprise to me too. And that is what my life has been too, a surprise around every corner. You know, my husband and I don't celebrate the anniversary of the day we met. We celebrate the anniversary of the day before we met. And we call that You Never Know Day, because you never know what wonderful thing is around the next corner. And that's how I look at my new career. That's how I look at my life. When I finished writing Primetime, I called Jonathan into the room and I said, sweetheart, watch this. And I typed the end. And then I burst into tears. I burst into tears because I knew that no matter what happened after that, I had followed my dreams, I had done what I always wanted to do. But of course I shouldn't have burst into tears when I typed the end, because it wasn't the end at all. It was the beginning of this wonderful new second half of my life. And I'm so grateful to you for inviting me here tonight to share it with you. Thank you. I'd be delighted to answer any questions that you have about books or mysteries or television or the mysteries of television. Anything you like? Yes?
Your new book, is it a follow-up to the other one? Same character, Jane? Or no?
These books are essentially standalones. So you can read them in any order, but this is book 2 in the series of Jake and Jane Ryland and Jake Brogan books. So you can read them in any order, but this does have some of the same characters. Sort of like your life does. You know, we see some of the same people every day. Some people come into our lives and some people go out of our lives. And so that's what sort of these books are. But each book is a sort of slice of life. So you'll get a new story every time, and you don't need to read one to have read the other. Yes?
On the subject of your investigative reporting, what's the riskiest thing you ever did?
Probably go to work in the morning. The riskiest thing I've ever done, that is really a good question. You know, I've gone undercover many times, wired myself with hidden cameras, certainly been in places where I'm not welcome. I've been in disguise. I mean, I went into a, well, the one time I got caught with my hidden camera, that was unpleasant. There's nothing illegal about wearing a hidden camera as long as you're not recording audio. It's illegal to record audio secretly, but it isn't illegal to record video. So I got dressed up in this big glasses and a cap pulled down over my hair, and my hair pulled back and no makeup. You just don't want to see that. You know, you would just not recognize me. And I went in, we had been told that there was a cult church operating in a part of Massachusetts. So we were going in undercover to find out what was going on. And so, you know, I got dressed up with this hidden camera and went in, because if in television, if there's not video, then it didn't happen. So we needed to record what was going on. So I go into this cult church, and it is creepy. You know, there are people handing out, I mean, I don't want to say Kool-Aid, but collecting money and going after vulnerable people, clearly. And I felt this tap on my shoulder. And I turned around, and there was this guy who says, "What's that in your purse?" And I was completely caught. I was completely caught. But I remembered what my mother said about the best defense being a good offense. So I sort of pulled myself up and I said, "You're making me very uncomfortable. Am I going to have to report you?" And I thought, in my heart, I'm going, report him to who? I don't even know who he is, let alone who I'm going to report him to. But he scooted, you know, he went away, and I just skedaddled out of there, having been caught, which is, I mean, it's scary, it's dangerous. I've been threatened with lawsuits many a time, many threatening phone calls, many threatening letters. You know, I had an executive producer years ago who said, a good investigative reporter comes to town and stays till everybody hates them. So luckily Boston is big, so I've been here for a while. But one of the things about being an investigative reporter for television is that generally you have a photographer with you. So I tell my photographer, if it looks like somebody's going to haul off and punch me, you know, make sure you get it on camera. Who else? Yes.
How do you now balance your television reporting schedule and your writing?
How do I balance my television reporting schedule and my writing? You know, that is the question of questions. It is, I love my life and I love both careers, but as you can imagine, it's quite a balance. Lots of authors get up at the crack of dawn and go to their computers and write from, you know, 5 in the morning till 7 in the morning. If I did that, my husband would come in and I'd be clonked on the computer like this. You know, I cannot write early in the morning. So I go to work at Channel 7 at the regular time. Jonathan and I drive to work together in the morning. And I read the newspaper out loud to him. Because it isn't fair for him just to be chauffeuring me to work. So I figure we need to do this together. So I read the newspaper out loud. And sometimes I try to make stuff up to see if he'll notice that I'm just making stuff up. Sometimes he does. Most times he does. Most times. Anyway, so we work from 9 till 6:30, drive home, and then when I'm in the writing mode, then I write maybe from 7 till 10. And then we have dinner at 10 o'clock together, and then sometimes I'll write after that. We eat a lot of, I used to cook. You know, cooking was the first, well, sleep was the first thing to go. You know, then cooking, then exercise, then vacations. We haven't had a vacation for years. And Jonathan is very, very patient because it does take up all the time. Jonathan has 2 grown kids and they live in Brooklyn and in California, so I get the fun of having kids and grandchildren, but I don't have to juggle the children part, which would just be way too much. So being a full-time reporter and being a full-time author leaves very little time for full-time anything else. I have a wonderfully patient husband. And I sort of have, I don't know, I have such a goal of having a successful career as an author that I don't feel that it's a sacrifice to work all the time. I kind of love it. You know, when you sit down at the computer and you might have a good idea, and your story's churning away, and you're creating this wonderful new world. The idea that you haven't had a vacation in a long time sort of disappears. So juggling is hard. The time management thing is incredibly difficult. I sort of just take one day at a time. I know what my deadlines are. I know what I have to do. I have an incredible number of lists. But any organized person does. So I guess that's how I do it. I just persevere. Does that answer your question?
Yes, it does.
Yes.
How did you find your publisher?
How did I find my publisher? Are you writing a book?
Yeah.
Okay. There are no secrets to that. I found my publisher by sending out cold queries to agents and finally finding an agent and being disappointed. I mean, I thought, parenthetically, it would be very easy, this is when I was a newbie, that it would be very easy to get an agent because I thought, I'm on television. I'm a television reporter. Who wouldn't want me for a client? Well, it turns out like a lot of people wouldn't want me for a client. And one agent actually told me that when she got submissions from television reporters, that she assumed that they would be bad because she says, oh, all of you TV people think you can write, but you can't write books. You can only write for television, and it's a different thing. So I did it the old-fashioned way. I sent out cold queries to agents, finally got an agent, and they sent out queries to publishers. And that's how that worked. So there's no magic, there's no secret, there's no anything except perseverance and hard work that, knock on wood, seems to have worked so far. But I mean, back in the days that when I started sending out my first manuscripts was when you had to do it on paper. No one accepted email manuscripts back in when I was 55, whenever that was, 2005, something like that. So you sent out your manuscript in a stamped self-addressed envelope. So when you saw that envelope in your mailbox, that meant it was a rejection. So every night, Jonathan and I would come home from work, and I'd look in the mailbox to see if there was another one of those brown envelopes that meant a no. And there was no, and no, and no, and no. And I finally said to my husband, Charlotte McNally, my main character for the first books is named Charlotte McNally. I said to him, Charlotte McNally's going to die. No one's ever going to meet her. And Jonathan said, no, Charlotte McNally is not going to die. Somebody's going to buy the book. And I said, you don't know. And just about then, the next day, somebody said yes, and then everybody started saying yes. So I tell budding authors, you have to hear no before you hear yes. And every no is one step closer to yes. So, there's joy and glory in just putting yourself out there and just seeing if someone loves your writing. And someone will, if you persevere. Who else? Yes?
I was just wondering about how you found the transition from radio and oral media to television.
Oh, what a good question. How I found the transition from radio to television where you need pictures. Because that's a fascinating question. Are you in radio or television?
I have a history in media, yeah.
Because people who, that's a very knowing question, how to transition from radio to television, because think about it, in radio you're talking about sound. It's only about the sound. It's about the story and the sound. But in television, it's about the story and the pictures. So learning to think cinematically was how I changed from radio to television. In telling a story in radio is very difficult because you need to grab the listener and take them to the place where your story is. And sometimes you need to do that with the sound. You hear that on NPR all the time, how wonderfully they do that. And I learned to get the background noise of clattering silverware or a whistle or a train or a car shift or something like that to take the listener to where the story is, bring them there. And in television, we talk about looking for the best video, the best pictures for every story, because that's what I'm trying to do as a television reporter, is to take you into the story, to make you feel like you're really there. And it's been, and that transition has been fabulous in writing mysteries and thrillers too, because the more cinematic a book can be, the more you feel like you're in that world. the more you're not going to be able to put the book down. So I try to write very visually. I try to think of my mysteries as movies. How would this be if this was a movie? How would this look? Where could I take the reader? So the transition from radio to television to print has been incredibly fascinating and has each built on itself. And nobody's ever asked me that before, and I think it's it's quite fascinating. Thank you. Who else has a question? Yes.
Why did you start up with a new character?
Why did I start up with a new character? Well, see, let's see, but how would I answer that? Nobody's ever asked me that either. There's a rhythm of a series when there's the main character of a book has an arc in each story, in each book. So there's the story that happens in book 1, the stories that happen in book 2, the stories that happen in book 3. But then there's also, when there's a main character of a series, there's an arc of that character's life that goes in a certain way. And it was sort of felt like the 4 books of the Charlie McNally series had taken her from being a sort of worried, vulnerable, unhappy, but tough reporter into being a pretty happy person at the end of book 4. Now, she could have more adventures, and that would be great, and I might write more Charlotte McNally books. But it was time to start a new character and a new adventure. When I got the idea for The Other Woman, as I told you about you can choose your sin, but you cannot choose your consequences, I knew that big thriller that I had just thought of was too big a story to tell in the first-person way of the Charlie McNally books. My first 4 books are all told in first person. And that means you only have the perspective of what one person sees, right? I only know what Charlie knows. You only see what she sees. You only think what she thinks. But so much was happening in my plan for The Other Woman that I knew that I couldn't have it be a big enough book in first person. It had to have several points of view. So I couldn't change the way the Charlie McNally books are written. They're in first person. They're going to be that way. So I needed to start a completely new project with a completely new way of looking at the world. And it's been fascinating talking to a question about changing over. Changing to having 2 different points of view or 3 different points of view allows me to have one character know something and one character knows something else. And the reader knows it all. So there's a way of playing with perception, there's a way of playing with possibilities, there's a way of making, everybody only knows what they see and think. So it allows for a much bigger book with a lot of dramatic irony and a lot of tension. A suspense book that has many points of view makes it all the more of a page turner because you have no idea what's going to happen next because the characters don't know. Does that make any sense? It was too big of a story for Charlie McNally. One last question, anyone? Yes?
I'm sure you've never been asked this before, Hank. Have you ever looked out at the audience and wondered if there's another woman out there?
They would never tell me. I'll see who doesn't buy the book, and that will be the other one. How about that?
First one up for the book is the other one.
No. Or something like that. Thank you. So I'll tell you the books are $25, but Dick sells them for $20 because it's you, so thank you. I'll be happy to sign them, personalize them. My agent requires me to say a signed book is a great gift. And I thank you so much for coming. It means a lot to me, and it means a lot to any author who appears at an event like this. We love libraries, and thank you so much for inviting me.